"There is no room for you at this table, old man." Those exact words hung in the air like a slap in the face that still stings my cheek. Standing there, in the middle of a crowded restaurant, listening to my own son, Edward, speak to me like I was something he had scraped off his shoe, I felt my heart crack. That night was supposed to be special. Edward had just landed a big promotion at his corporate job, and he had invited the whole family to dinner at the Gilded Table, one of the fanciest steakhouses in downtown Chicago. I put on my only pressed shirt, the one I save for weddings and funerals, and I arrived right on time, just like I always have. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw Edward already sitting at a large table, chatting with his wife Monica and my 2 grandkids. I walked up smiling, just happy to be there with my family. But Edward didn't smile back. He looked me up and down, like he was looking at a stain on a white tablecloth. "Dad," he said, but not with any affection, just that tone people use when they are annoyed. "Is that how you came dressed?" I looked down at my shirt, my clean trousers. I didn't understand what was wrong. "Well, yes, son, I put on the best I have." Edward sighed loudly, like I was a heavy backpack he had to carry up a mountain. "It's just that this place is very elegant, Dad." The people nearby went quiet, but I knew exactly what he meant. He meant I didn't belong there. Monica, his wife, didn't even say hello. She just kept staring at her phone like it was the most important thing in the world. My grandkids, Sebastian, who is 15, and Valerie, 13, didn't say anything either. It was like I was invisible. "Well," I said, trying to break that awkward tension, "can I sit down?" And that was when Edward said those words I will never forget. "There is no room for you at this table, old man." I felt like someone had hit me in the chest with a sledgehammer. Old man. He called me old man, right? And there was no room for me at his table, at my own son's table. Monica looked up from her phone and gave me that fake smile that people use when they think they are better than you. "Mr. Harrison," she said, and even my name sounded strange in her mouth. "We only reserved this table for 4 people, but you can ask for another table, right? There are some more appropriate tables in the back." Appropriate. That word hurt more than all the others combined. I stood there, feeling the eyes of everyone in the restaurant burning into me. Some were whispering, probably wondering what a guy like me was doing in a place like this. Edward didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, ashamed of his own father. For a moment, I thought about leaving. I thought about walking out that door and never looking back. But then I remembered something my father taught me years ago. "Son, a man is measured by how he reacts when he is humiliated. You can hang your head like a beaten dog, or you can show them what you are made of." So I smiled, a calm, unhurried smile, and I turned to the waiter who was clearing a table near us. "Excuse me, young man," I said. "Where can I find the owner of this place?" Edward frowned. "What do you want to talk to the owner for, Dad?" "To ask for a table," I answered without losing my smile. "If there is no room for me at my son's table, then I am going to ask for my own table." The waiter looked at me strangely. Then he looked at Edward and then back at me. "The owner is in the kitchen, sir, but I can get you a table." "No, son. I need to speak to the owner. It is important." Edward looked annoyed, like I was throwing a tantrum. "Dad, don't make a scene. Just go home. We'll see you another day." "We'll see you another day." Like I was a dentist appointment that could be canceled. But I had already made my decision. That night, my son was going to learn who his father really was. That night, my whole family was going to discover something I had kept secret for many years. Because there are things you don't say, not to brag, but because it simply isn't necessary. But when you are humiliated in front of the whole world, when your own son treats you like a nuisance, well, the time comes to show the cards you have been hiding up your sleeve. I walked toward the kitchen, feeling the stares of all the diners stuck to my back. Edward shouted something behind me, but I didn't listen anymore. The only thing I heard was the beating of my heart and a voice inside my head saying, "Richard, your moment has arrived." When I pushed through the kitchen doors, the heat hit me in the face like a wave of memories. The sound of pans sizzling, the shouts of the cooks, the smell of spices, all of it took me straight back to my younger years. The kitchen was at full steam. It was Friday night, and the restaurant was packed. There were 5 cooks working like crazy, 2 dishwashers running from one side to the other, and waiters coming in and out with full trays. At first, nobody saw me. Everyone was focused on their work. But then a young kid who was drying dishes looked at me with a weird expression. "Hey, sir," he said. "Customers can't be back here in the kitchen." I just stood there watching all the movement. It was like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Everyone knew exactly what to do and when to do it. It gave me a lot of pleasure to see that because it meant things were being done right. "I'm looking for the manager," I told the kid, "or the owner." The kid looked me up and down. I knew what he was thinking. What is this old guy doing here, dressed so plain, asking for the boss? "Mr. Martin is in his office," he said. "But he's very busy. If you want to make a complaint, you better talk to the head waiter." Mr. Martin. That name sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember where from. So many years had passed since I hired all these managers. "It's not a complaint, son. It is something personal." Just at that moment, a tall man with a mustache wearing a black suit walked up. He looked important, like the boss. "What is going on here?" he asked with that voice people use when they are in charge. "Why is there a customer in the kitchen?" The kid with the dishes pointed at me. "This gentleman says he wants to speak with Mr. Martin." The man in the suit looked at me with suspicion. "I am the sub-manager, Charles Mendez. How can I help you?" I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm the owner of this joint," just like that. First, I needed to see how well they were running my business. "Look, young man," I said, "I just came from dining with my family out there, and a little problem came up. I need to speak with the owner of this restaurant." Charles looked at me with that smile employees use when they think you are crazy. "A little problem? What kind?" "Family," I answered. "Very familiar." Right then, one of the cooks, an older man with a stained apron, turned to look at me. He stood there observing me for a long moment, frowning, like he was trying to remember something. "Hey," he said, "aren't you—" But before he could finish the question, another cook interrupted him, shouting, "Manny, the fish is burning!" The cook who had seen me had to turn around, running to rescue his pan, but I realized he had recognized me, or at least he suspected something. Charles kept talking to me. "Look, sir, if you have a problem with the service or the food, I can help you, but the owner of this restaurant doesn't come around here very often." That made me very curious. Doesn't come around often? I paid all my managers very well, precisely so that they would take care of everything, but I always thought they knew who I was. "And do you know the owner?" I asked him. "Of course I know him," Charles said, showing off a bit. "Mr. Richard Harrison, a very important man, highly respected in Chicago. He has several restaurants all over the city." So they did know my name. That was good. "And what is he like?" I asked, feeling a strange curiosity to know what they thought of me. Charles straightened up as if he were talking about a saint. "He is a very serious man, very hard-working. He started from the bottom. They say he worked as a waiter and a cook when he was young. Now he is one of the most successful businessmen in the city." "And have you seen him lately?" "No. To be honest, no. He handles everything through his lawyers and accountants. We report to Mr. Martin, who is like his right hand." There was the problem. I had distanced myself so much from the day-to-day of my businesses that My own employees didn't know me anymore. Only the oldest ones, like the cook who had seen me, still remembered. Just then a young waiter came running in, very agitated. "Boss," he said to Charles, "there is a problem at table 12. A man walked into the kitchen without permission and his family is very upset. They say the old man is making a scene." Charles looked at me with a face that said, "I get it now." "Is that your family problem?" he asked me, not as friendly as before. I nodded my head. Something like that. "Look, sir," Charles said, changing his tone completely. "I understand that sometimes families have their differences, but this is a first-class restaurant. We cannot allow customers to just walk into the kitchen. I'm going to ask you to go back to your table." "I already told you I don't have a table," I replied. "My family decided there was no room for me." Charles sighed as if I were a bratty child. "Fine. Then we will get you a table. But you have to get out of here. First, I want to speak with Mr. Martin. The counselor cannot attend to every customer who gets mad at their family." That comment annoyed me. It annoyed me a lot because I wasn't just a customer mad at his family. I was the owner of all this, standing in his own kitchen, being treated like a nuisance. But it still wasn't the moment to reveal everything. First, I wanted to see how far this went. "All right," I said. "Get me a table. But make it the best table you have available." Charles smiled, thinking he had resolved the problem. "Perfect. I will ask one of the waiters to seat you." As we walked out of the kitchen, I looked back one last time. The older cook was still watching me, and now he was whispering something to another one of the older employees. I knew they were trying to remember where they had seen me before. When we got to the dining area, I saw that Edward was still at his table, but now he looked nervous. Monica was talking on the phone, probably telling someone about the spectacle her father-in-law had made. My grandkids didn't lift their eyes from their plates. Charles spoke to the head waiter, an elegant man in his 40s. "Roger," he said, "get this gentleman the best table available." Roger looked at me and nodded professionally. "Of course. I have a very good table by the window." But I had other plans. I pointed toward a table that was exactly in the center of the restaurant where everyone could see. "That table," I said. "But sir, that table is reserved for 8 people. You are alone." "Okay, that table," I repeated, with a voice that didn't allow for discussion. Roger looked at me strangely, but something in my tone told him it wasn't a good idea to contradict me. "As you wish, sir." While I settled into that big table in the center of everything, Edward watched me from his corner with a face full of shame and confusion. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand why his dad, whom he had just humiliated, had been given the best table in the restaurant. But I knew why. And in a few more minutes, he was going to know too. As I sat at that center table with the whole restaurant observing me, I couldn't help but remember the first day I stepped into this place. It was very different back then. It was called the Rusty Spoon, and it was a small, half-dirty diner that was almost always empty. That was 45 years ago. I was 28, I had just married my hope, and I needed work urgently. We had rented a little room on the south side, and every dollar counted. The previous owner was Old Man Arthur, a bitter man who treated all his employees badly. He hired me as a waiter because I was the only one who had gone to ask for work that day. The pay was peanuts, but I needed to start somewhere. I remember on the first day he told me, "Boy, the rules here are simple. You show up early, you work quietly, and you don't make me look bad. If you don't like it, there's the door." I told him, "Don't worry, Mr. Arthur. I came to work, not to cause trouble." But Old Man Arthur was a strange man. He spent his time drinking at a table in the back, yelling at the cooks, treating the customers poorly. The restaurant was dying little by little, and he didn't even notice. The first few months were very hard. Sometimes not even 10 customers would come in all day. Arthur blamed everyone but himself. "People around here don't know how to appreciate good food," he would say. But the truth was the food was bad, the place was dirty, and he treated everyone like dirt. I started to see things that could be improved. The sauce was always cold, the tablecloths had stains, the waiters didn't even know what was on the menu. But when I suggested something to Arthur, he yelled at me. "You just serve the tables and shut up. I've been doing this for 30 years. One night, after an especially bad day where only 3 customers had come, Arthur got drunker than usual. He started saying he was tired, that the business was useless, that he was just going to close it. "Damn restaurant," he said. "It doesn't even make enough for expenses. I better sell this thing and get out of town." That night, I stayed up thinking. My hope was pregnant with Edward, our first son. I needed more than a waiter's salary. I needed something secure, something that could grow. The next day, I arrived early, as always. Old man Arthur arrived late, hungover, in a bad mood. He sat at his usual table and ordered coffee. "Mr. Arthur," I said, "can I talk to you?" "Now what?" he grunted at me. "Last night you said you wanted to sell the restaurant. So what? How much are you asking for it?" Arthur stared at me like I was crazy. "You? A waiter? Are you pulling my leg?" "I'm serious, Mr. Arthur." He laughed a bitter laugh. "Boy, this is worth a lot of money. More than you are going to earn in your whole life." "How much?" I insisted. $30,000, he told me, as if it were impossible. "And that's cheap, because it includes everything. The furniture, the kitchen, the permit, everything." $30,000. At that time, it was a fortune. I was making $300 a month. I would have to save for 8 years without spending a dime to gather that amount. But there was something old man Arthur didn't know. My dad, before dying, had left me a small plot of land on the outskirts of Chicago. A piece of dirt nobody wanted because it was too far from everything. My mom had told me, "Son, never sell that land. Your dad said someday it would be worth a lot." Turns out my dad was right. The city had started to grow toward that side, and a developer had offered me exactly $35,000 for the land. "Give me a week to get the money," I told Arthur. "A week?" He laughed loudly. "Boy, you couldn't get it in a year." "1 week," I repeated. I don't know why, but something in my voice made him listen. "All right," he said. "You have a week. But when you don't bring the money, I don't want any more of this nonsense." That same afternoon, I went to see the developer. I sold my dad's land for $35,000. I kept $5,000 for the first improvements to the restaurant. When I came back a week later with the money, old man Arthur almost fell off his chair. "It can't be," he said, counting the bills. "Where did you get all this?" "That doesn't matter," I said. "Do we have a deal?" And that was how I became the owner of the Rusty Spoon at 28 years old. The first thing I did was change the name. The Gilded Table sounded more elegant, more serious. Then I hired a real cook, one who knew how to make delicious food. I cleaned the whole place from top to bottom. I changed the tablecloths, fixed the chairs, painted the walls. But the most important thing was the service. I had been a waiter. I knew what customers wanted. Hot food, fresh bread, attentive waiters, meals that arrived fast and well presented. At first, it was very difficult. The first few months I had almost no profit because everything went into improvements. My hope worked with me, helping me with the register, serving tables when there were a lot of people. Edward was a baby then, and he stayed sleeping in a basket behind the counter. But little by little, people started coming. First the neighbors, then their relatives, then their friends. In 6 months, we already had regular customers. In a year, we had to hire more waiters. In 2 years, the restaurant was full every night. Edward grew up watching all this. Since he was little, he walked among the tables, playing with the waiters, helping his mom. He liked counting the money in the register. He always asked how much we had sold each day. When he turned 15, I told him, "Son, someday all this will be yours, but you have to study first. You have to prepare yourself." He would tell me, "Dad, I want to work here with you." "No, Edward, you are going to be an engineer or a doctor or an executive, something important. This business will wait for you." Now, 45 years later, I was sitting in my own restaurant remembering all that. Edward was a few yards away from me, but he felt further away than ever. The waiter approached my table. "What can I bring you to drink, sir?" "A coffee," I said, "black and strong." While I waited for my coffee, I saw that Edward kept looking at me from his table. He looked confused, nervous. Monica was whispering something in his ear, probably asking him why he hadn't kicked me out of the restaurant yet. But what hurt me most was seeing my grandkids. Sebastian and Valerie ate in silence without looking up. They didn't know what to think of all this. To them, I was just an old grandfather who had made an embarrassing scene. If they only knew that the man their dad had just humiliated was the same man who had built everything they saw around them. The coffee arrived at my table, steaming, with that smell that reminded me of early mornings working in the kitchen. While I took the first sip, I kept remembering how my business had grown. After 5 years of owning the Gilded Table, I already had money saved and a good reputation. Customers recommended me to their friends, and there was always a line to get a table on weekends. It was then that Mr. Ramiro, the owner of the Golden Hearth on the other side of the city, came to find me one afternoon. "Richard," he said, "I have a problem. My restaurant is broke and I can't pay for it anymore. They told me you are good at business." Mr. Ramiro was an older man, very proud. You could tell it cost him work to admit he had failed. "What kind of help do you need, Mr. Ramiro?" I asked him. "I need you to buy the restaurant," he told me directly, without beating around the bush. "But on one condition, that nobody knows you are the new owner." That surprised me. "Why?" "Because my family has many years in this business, and if it gets out that I sold, my reputation goes to the floor. My children work in important companies, and I don't want them to find out their dad went broke." I understood perfectly what he was asking. He was a man of honor who had worked his whole life, and he didn't want his children to see him as a failure. "And how do you propose we handle this?" I asked. "You buy the restaurant from me, but I keep appearing as the owner. You handle the finances from behind. I handle the public face. And we split the profits 50-50. It was a strange deal, but I liked the idea. I could have 2 restaurants without anyone realizing it. "Deal," I said, and that was how my habit of being the invisible owner began. Over the next 10 years, I kept buying more restaurants the same way. I always found owners who had financial problems but wanted to keep up appearances. I bought the business, but they kept appearing as the official owners. To handle all this, I hired a very smart accountant, Mr. Martin, who now directed operations from the shadows. He was the only one who knew I was the true owner of 7 restaurants in Chicago. Why did I do it like that? First, because I liked privacy. Second, because when people know you have money, problems start arriving. Cousins asking for loans, friends with shady business ideas. But the most important reason was my family. I wanted Edward to study and become a professional. Not for him to get used to living off his dad's inheritance. I wanted him to learn to work, to fight, to value things. During all these years, Edward thought I had a single restaurant, a small business, successful, but nothing more. He never knew his dad was the owner of a restaurant chain that generated millions of dollars a year. When Edward graduated from university with a degree in business administration, I waited for him to say, "Dad, I want to work with you. I want to learn the business." But no, Edward had other plans. "Dad," he told me on his graduation day, "I got a job at a very important company. I'm going to be an executive." "And what about the restaurant?" I asked. "The restaurant is fine for you, Dad, but I want to do bigger things." Bigger things. As if what I had built was nothing. Edward started working at that company, earning a salary that seemed very good to him, but was a fraction of what I made in a week. He married Monica, a woman from a well-to-do family who, from day one, looked at me like I was lower class. Over the years, Edward started to change. He didn't come to the restaurant like before. When he came, he acted distant, like it was an obligation. Monica always found excuses not to join him. "It's just that the restaurant is very far," she would say, or "we have other commitments." Little by little, Edward started to be ashamed of me. When his friends from the firm asked what his dad did, he said, "He has a small food business." A small food business. Like it was a taco stand on the corner. When my grandkids, Sebastian and Valerie, were born, I thought things would change. I thought Edward would want his kids to know their grandfather, that they would spend time together. But no. Edward taught my grandkids to treat me with respect, yes, but also with distance. Like I was a nice old man, but unimportant in their lives. "Kids," Edward would tell them, "say hello to your grandpa. He has a little restaurant." A little restaurant. Always diminutives. Always taking away the importance of everything I had achieved. Things got worse when Edward started making more money at his job. They moved to a bigger house in a more elegant suburb. They bought new cars, sent the kids to expensive private schools. And every time we saw each other, Edward talked about his achievements like they were more important than everything I had done. "Dad, I got promoted to regional manager," he would tell me. "Now I handle accounts for very important companies." "That's good, son," I would answer. "I am very happy for you." But inside, it hurt. Because I knew that with the money from just one of my restaurants, I could buy the entire company where he worked. Why didn't I tell him the truth? Because I hoped that someday he would realize that his dad was not a small man. I hoped that someday he would come and say, "Dad, teach me what you know. I want to learn from you." But that never happened. Instead, every year Edward moved further away. Every year he treated me with less respect. Every year his children knew me less. And tonight, in this restaurant I had bought when he was 20, he had told me there was no room for me at his table. I took another sip of coffee and looked over to where Edward was. He was still talking to Monica in a low voice, probably planning how to get me out of there without making more of a scene. What he didn't know was that in my pocket I had my phone, and in my phone I had Mr. Martin's direct number. One single call, and Edward was going to discover who his dad really was. But before making that call, I wanted him to understand completely what he had done. I wanted him to feel in his own flesh what it felt like to be humiliated in front of people. Because after tonight, things between Edward and me were never going to be the same. I took out my phone and found Mr. Martin's contact, but before dialing, I turned again toward Edward's table. There he was, laughing at something Monica had said, as if nothing had happened. As if humiliating his father was the most normal thing in the world. My grandkids kept eating without making a sound. Sebastian occasionally looked at me sideways, but when our eyes met, he turned quickly toward his plate. Valerie hadn't even turned toward where I was. That hurt me more than anything else, that my own grandkids saw me as an embarrassment. I dialed Mr. Martin's number. After 3 rings, he answered. "Hello, Martin speaking." "Mr. Martin, it's Richard Harrison." Immediately, the tone of his voice changed completely. "Mr. Harrison, what a pleasure to hear you. How are you?" "I'm fine. Counselor. Listen, where are you right now? At home, Mr. Harrison, having dinner with my family. Do you need something urgent? Yes, I need you to come to the gilded table. Right now. Right now? Did something serious happen? Let's say there is a family situation that needs your attention. Mr. Martin knew that when I asked for something urgent, it was because it was truly important. In all these years working with me, I had never bothered him at home for nonsense. I'm on my way immediately, Mr. Harrison. Do you need me to bring something? Any documents? Bring the property deeds to the restaurant. The originals. The deeds? What for? Counselor, trust me. Bring the papers and come fast. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Mr. Harrison. I hung up the phone and stayed there, sitting, drinking my coffee. From my table, I could see the whole restaurant. It was Friday night, and there were about 80 people dining. All those families, all those couples, all those kids. Everyone was in my restaurant, spending their money in my business, without knowing that the owner was sitting there, dressed simply, drinking coffee alone. The waiter approached my table. Can I offer you something to order for dinner yet, sir? Not yet, son. I am waiting for someone. Perfect. Anything you need, let me know. That kid was very attentive, very professional. It gave me pleasure to see that Charles had trained his staff well. Even though he hadn't recognized me, he was doing a good job. I turned again toward Edward. Now he was talking on the phone, probably with someone from his work. He always talked about his work like it was the most important thing in the world. Monica was taking photos of the food with her phone, surely to show off on her social networks that they were dining at an elegant restaurant. Just then, Roger, the head waiter, arrived at Edward's table. Excuse me, sir, he said to Edward. Is everything okay with your father? Edward turned to see me with a face of annoyance. Yes, he's fine. He is a little stubborn. You know how old folks are. Old folks. That word hit me like a slap. It's just that we were a little worried, Roger continued, when he went into the kitchen to look for the owner. He looked for the owner? Edward asked, surprised. Yes, he said he needed to speak with the owner about a family matter, but the sub-manager calmed him down and we got him this table. Edward looked at me with that face you make when someone is publicly embarrassing you. Don't worry, he told Roger. My dad sometimes gets confused. He's getting old. He's getting old. Like I was a senile old man who didn't know what he was doing. I understand perfectly, said Roger. I have a dad the same age. Sometimes he does strange things too. Strange things. That was what they thought of me. An old man doing strange things. Roger left and Edward kept chatting with his family. But every now and then he looked at me, like asking himself what else I was going to do to shame him. 15 minutes passed. I was still there, drinking my coffee, watching everyone eat. There was a young couple at the table next to me who looked very much in love. The boy was feeding his girlfriend, and she was laughing. It reminded me of when Edward was little, and I did the same with him. Edward had been a very affectionate child. He always walked glued to me. He always wanted to help me in the restaurant. On Sundays, when there was no school, he came with me early and stayed all day. He liked chatting with the customers, helping carry plates, counting the money in the register. Dad, he would say, when I grow up, I want to have a restaurant like yours. Better study so you have something better than this, my son. No, Dad, there is nothing better than this. Here everyone is happy, eats well, has fun. This is the most beautiful thing in the world. At what moment did he forget all that? At what moment did he decide that what I had built wasn't good enough for him? Just then I saw Charles, the sub-manager, approaching quickly toward the entrance. Mr. Martin had arrived. I saw him enter through the front door. He was a tall man, well-dressed, with a briefcase in his hand. Charles received him immediately and accompanied him toward my table. Mr. Harrison, the attorney said when he arrived, I am here. What do you need? Sit down, counselor, I said, pointing to the chair opposite. Mr. Martin sat down and put his briefcase on the table. Charles remained standing there as if waiting for orders. Charles, I said, introduce me to Mr. Martin. Charles looked at me confused. Excuse me? Introduce you to the counselor? Tell me who he is. Charles turned to see the attorney, then he looked at me and then went back to see the attorney. He looked completely lost. This is Mr. Martin, Charles said, as if I didn't know how to read. He is the one who handles the operations of all of Mr. Harrison's restaurants. And who is Mr. Harrison? I asked him. Well, the owner of this restaurant and 6 others. And what is this Mr. Harrison like? Do you know him? Charles started to sweat. He didn't understand where all this was going. Well, not personally, sir. He is a very busy man, very important. He doesn't come around here often. Charles, Mr. Martin said with a smile, allow me to formally introduce you to Mr. Richard Harrison, your boss, the owner of this restaurant. Charles's jaw dropped, literally. He stood there, staring at me as if he had seen a ghost. He is the owner, confirmed the attorney. The same gentleman who an hour ago told you he wanted to speak with me. Charles turned pale. Mr. Harrison, I didn't know. You, forgive me, Relax, Charles, I said. You did your job, there's no problem. But while I was saying that to Charles, I had my eyes fixed on Edward, because Edward had heard the entire conversation, and the face he made when he realized what had just happened, that face, I will remember for the rest of my life. Edward got up from his chair so fast he almost knocked it over. His face had turned red, like when he was a boy and got caught doing mischief. But this time it wasn't mischief. It was something much worse. He approached my table walking like a robot with stiff steps, while his whole family followed him with their eyes. Monica had her mouth open. Sebastian and Valerie had stopped eating and looked at me with huge eyes, as if it were the first time they were seeing me. Dad, Edward said to me, but his voice came out like a whisper. Is it true what this man said? I stayed calm, drinking my coffee. What thing, son? That you are the owner of this restaurant. Mr. Martin opened his briefcase and took out a folder full of papers. Do you want me to show you the documents? He asked Edward. Your dad has been the owner of this restaurant for 25 years, and also of 6 others in Chicago. Edward let himself fall into an empty chair. He looked as if someone had hit him with a hammer on the head. It can't be, he murmured. It can't be. Charles was still standing there, sweating, not knowing what to do. Other waiters had approached and were whispering among themselves. People at nearby tables had started to turn to look at us, sensing that something important was happening. Counselor, I said to Martin, can you explain to my son which are our restaurants? Of course, Mr. Harrison. The attorney addressed Edward as if he were giving a business presentation. Your father is the proprietor of the Gilded Table, where we are now, also of the Golden Hearth, the Tapping Keg, Tradition Grill, the Flavor Corner, the Grand Table, and Aromas of the City. Edward knew all those names. They were famous restaurants in Chicago, elegant places where important people went. But that can't be, Edward said as if talking to himself. Dad, you have a restaurant. A small restaurant, you told me. I never told you it was small, I replied. You decided it was small. Since when? Since you were 20, Edward? Since you graduated from college? Edward put his hands to his head. 20 years. You have had all this for 20 years and never told me. I was waiting for you, I said, looking him straight in the eyes. I hoped that someday you would come and say, "Dad, teach me your business. I want to learn from you." But you had your job, your career. My career, he repeated. Do you know how much you earn a month in your career, Edward? Edward didn't answer, but I knew the answer. Monica had once bragged to me that Edward made $6,000 a month, as if it were a fortune. Mr. Martin, I said, how much do our restaurants generate a month? On average, Mr. Harrison, between all of them, it is around $500,000 in monthly gross revenue. $500,000. Edward went silent. Monica, who had arrived at the table behind him, turned pale. 500,000? Edward asked with a broken voice. That is the gross billing, explained the attorney. After expenses, employees, taxes, and everything, Mr. Harrison's net profit is approximately $150,000 a month. $150,000 a month. Edward earned $6,000. I earned in 2 days what he earned in an entire month. Dad? Edward said. Why didn't you tell me anything? Because I wanted you to be a real man, I answered. I wanted you to learn to work, to fight, to value things. I didn't want you to be a spoiled rich kid. But I am your son. I should have known. Yes, you are my son. And precisely because of that, I expected more from you. Monica stepped closer and stood there, like a statue. She looked as if she were calculating numbers in her head, thinking of all the times she had treated me as if I were poor. Mr. Harrison, said Charles, who was still there, do you want us to give your family another table, a more private one, so you can talk in peace? No, I said, we're fine here. But I do want you to call the entire staff, all the waiters, cooks, dishwashers, cashiers. I want to meet them. Everyone? Asked Charles. Everyone. Charles ran off. In 5 minutes, the entire restaurant staff was lined up in front of my table. There were about 20 people, waiters, cooks, helpers, cleaning staff. Everyone looked at me with curiosity and respect. Colleagues, I said, standing up. I want to introduce myself formally. I am Richard Harrison, the owner of this restaurant. Some already knew because of what had happened with Charles, but others were surprised. A young waitress put her hand to her mouth. One of the older cooks smiled and said, I knew it. I knew I had seen him before. You have done an excellent job, I told them. This restaurant is running perfectly, and that is thanks to you. For that, each of you is going to receive a bonus of $1,000 in your next paycheck. The whole staff started clapping and thanking me. They looked very happy, but I hadn't finished. And I also want you to meet my family, I kept saying. He is my son Edward, his wife Monica, and my grandkids, Sebastian and Valerie. Edward was sitting with his head in his hands. He didn't want to look up. Monica tried to smile, but it looked forced. My grandkids looked at me like I was an alien. My son Edward, I told the staff, just got a very important promotion at his job. He is very proud of his career. The sarcasm in my voice was obvious. Edward noticed it and looked at me with a pleading face as if telling me, Stop now, Dad. I also want you to know, I continued, that an hour ago, my son told me there was no room for me at his table. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The whole staff stared at Edward, some with pity, others with disapproval. One of the waitresses shook her head as if saying, What a shame. Edward stood up. Dad, please. Please what, Edward? That I don't tell the truth? Dad, I didn't know. If I had known, if you had known what? That your dad has money? Only then would you have treated me with respect? Edward couldn't answer, because we both knew what the answer was. Colleagues, I told the staff, you can return to your work. Thanks for everything." The staff dispersed, but I knew they were going to be talking about this for weeks. The story of the son who humiliated his dad without knowing he was his boss. Edward sat down again. He looked defeated. "Dad, what do you want me to do? How can I fix this?" That was a good question. A question he should have asked many years ago. "How can you fix this?" I repeated Edward's question. I stared at him for a long moment, as if I were thinking. "That is a very interesting question, son." Edward had red eyes. I don't know if from shame or if he wanted to cry. Monica had stayed quiet, but I saw her calculating in her head all the times she had despised me. "Mr. Martin," I said, "can you tell Edward how much my total net worth is?" "Mr. Harrison, are you sure?" "Completely sure." The attorney opened another folder. "According to the last financial statement, considering the 7 restaurants, the real estate properties, investments, and cash in banks, Mr. Harrison's net worth is approximately $12 million. $12 million. Edward ran out of air. Monica had to sit down because her legs wouldn't hold her. My grandkids looked at us as if we were speaking in another language. "12 million, murmured Edward. "Dad, you're a millionaire?" "Yes, Edward. Your dad, the old man who does strange things, the one with the little restaurant, the one who doesn't deserve to sit at your table. That old man has $12 million. Monica finally spoke, but with a very quiet voice. "Mr. Harrison, we didn't know." "Didn't know what, Monica? Didn't know I had money? And that's why you treated me like trash?" "No, it's not that," she started to say, but she shut up because she knew she was lying. "Monica," I said, "for 10 years you have made me feel like a burden. Every time I come to your house, you look at me like a nuisance. Every time Edward wants to invite me somewhere, you find an excuse for me not to go." "Do you remember last Christmas?" I asked her. "When Edward wanted us to have dinner together, what did you say?" Monica turned redder. She remembered perfectly. "You said it was better for me to spend Christmas at my house because your family was coming and they were accustomed to a certain social level." "Mr. Harrison, I didn't mean..." "Didn't mean what? That I didn't have enough social standing for your family?" Edward intervened. "Dad, Monica sometimes says things without thinking." "Without thinking?" I interrupted him. "Edward, your wife has spent 10 years telling her whole family that your dad is a poor, uneducated man." "That's not true," said Monica, but without conviction. "No?" Mr. Martin took out his phone. "Do you want me to call old man Arthur, your father, and ask him what he thinks of Edward's dad?" Monica turned pale. Her dad owned a medium-sized company, and she had always bragged that her son-in-law came from a good family, but that the father-in-law was a simple man from the town. "Please, no," murmured Monica. "And my grandkids?" I kept looking at Sebastian and Valerie. "You two, do you know what the teacher calls me when you go to school?" Sebastian, who was 15, answered very quietly. "The grandpa with the little restaurant." Exactly. The grandpa with the little restaurant. Like it was something to be ashamed of. Valerie, 13 years old, spoke for the first time. "Grandpa, I didn't know that you had..." "Money?" I said. "Is that what matters, sweetheart? Money?" "No, Grandpa, you never took us to see your other restaurants. You never told us about your businesses." "Do you know why?" The kids shook their heads. "Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have. But turns out you don't even know me for who I am." Edward stood up again. "Dad, this is my fault. I taught them to think like that. I told them your business was small. Why, Edward? Why did you lie to them about me? Edward stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? That my friends from work would know my dad was a restaurant owner. And what is wrong with being a restaurant owner? Nothing, Dad. But I wanted them to think I had gotten far on my own merits, not because my family had money. But you didn't know I had money. No, but I knew the restaurant was doing well, and I didn't want them to think I was a rich kid. There was the truth. Edward had spent so many years denying what I did that he had ended up being ashamed of me. Edward, I said, during all these years, you have bragged about your job, your salary, your house, your car. You have made me feel like I was a failure, like what I had built was worth nothing. Dad, I never. Yes, Edward, yes, you did. And not just with me, also with your children. You taught them to see their grandfather as someone less important than you. Sebastian spoke again. Grandpa, we don't think that. No, son? When was the last time you came to visit me? When was the last time you wanted to spend a Sunday with me? The kids looked at each other. They couldn't remember. You know why you don't come visit me? Because your parents have taught you that my house is small, that my life is boring, that Grandpa has nothing interesting to offer you. Grandpa, said Valerie, if we had known, what would you have done differently? Would you have loved me more if you had known I had money? Valerie couldn't answer because she knew that was exactly the truth. Mr. Martin, I said, can you call the manager of the Golden Hearth? What for, Mr. Harrison? I want him to prepare a table for 10 people. A very special table. 10 people? Yes. Edward, Monica, my grandkids, and 5 of the employees from here who have worked the longest with me. Edward looked at me confused. What for? Because we are going to have dinner all together, and during that dinner, my employees are going to tell you what I was like 20 years ago when I started buying restaurants. They are going to tell you about the man you never bothered to know. Dad, it's not necessary. Yes, it is necessary, Edward. Because after tonight, we are going to talk about your future. My future? Yes, because you are going to have to decide if you want to be my son for real, or if you want to keep being a stranger who is ashamed of his dad. Edward swallowed hard. What do you mean? I mean that all this, I made a gesture pointing to the restaurant. Someday it is going to belong to someone, and that someone can be my son, or it can be another person. For the first time that night, I saw real fear in Edward's eyes. Fear of losing something he had never valued but now realized what it meant. Half an hour later, we were all sitting at the Golden Hearth, the second restaurant I had bought 22 years ago. It was a more intimate place than the Gilded Table, with wooden tables and traditional decor. Edward, Monica, and my grandkids sat on one side of the table. On the other side were 5 of my oldest employees. Manny, the cook who had recognized me in the kitchen. Rose, the cashier who had been with me 15 years. Harvey, the oldest waiter. Carmen, the cleaning supervisor. And Raul, the kitchen helper who had started with me when he was 18. Mr. Martin had arranged everything very quickly. The manager of the Golden Hearth had prepared the main table, the one used for special occasions. I sat at the head, looking at my whole family and my employees. It was a weird scene, millionaires and workers, bosses and employees, all sitting at the same table. Well, I said, I gathered you here because I want my family to know the true story of how we got here. Edward still looked uncomfortable. Monica hadn't spoken since we left the other restaurant. Sebastian and Valerie watched the employees with curiosity, as if they were zoo animals. Manny, I said to the cook, do you remember the first day you came to work with me? Manny smiled. He was a man of about 50, with hands marked by years of kitchen work. Of course I remember, Mr. Harrison. That was 18 years ago. I was looking for work because they had fired me from the hotel where I worked. And how did you meet me? You were working in the kitchen of the Gilded Table, but not as a boss, but with your hands in the dough, making sauces, tasting the stews, teaching the new cooks. Edward looked at me surprised. You worked in the kitchen? Every day, I answered him, from 6 in the morning to 11 at night. The first 5 years after buying the restaurant, I did everything. Cooked, served tables, washed dishes when it was necessary. But, Dad, you never told me. Rose, I said to the cashier, interrupting Edward, tell them what I was like in those years. Rose was a small woman, about 60, with a very sweet smile. Mr. Harrison was the hardest working boss I have ever known, said Rose. He arrived before everyone and left after everyone, and never, ever did he shout at us or mistreat us. Do you remember when Harvey's daughter got sick? I asked the employees. Harvey nodded. My girl got very serious. She needed a very expensive operation. I didn't have money or insurance that covered everything. And what happened? Asked Sebastian. Mr. Harrison paid for the whole operation, said Harvey, without me asking. He simply arrived at the hospital and spoke with the doctors. How much did that operation cost? Asked Edward. $20,000, I answered. At that time, it was a lot of money. And why did you do it? Because Harvey was part of my family, and one takes care of his family. Monica spoke for the first time. Mr. Harrison, we never knew you were like that. Like what, Monica? So generous, so good to your employees. Carmen, I told the cleaning supervisor, tell them about when your husband died. Carmen was an older woman, very thin, who had worked with me for 15 years. When my Rudy died, started Carmen, I was left alone with my 3 little kids. I didn't have my own house. I rented a very ugly little room. And what happened? Asked Valerie. Mr. Harrison helped me buy a little house. He lent me the money without interest and let me pay him little by little, however I could. How long did it take you to pay me? I asked her. 8 years, Mr. Harrison. 8 years he waited for me without rushing me, without charging me interest. Edward looked smaller and smaller in his chair. Dad, why did you never tell me any of this? Because it wasn't for bragging, I answered him. It was my obligation. Raoul, I told the kitchen helper, tell them your story. Raoul was a dark-haired guy, skinny, with hands calloused from hard work. I arrived here when I was 18, started Raoul. I didn't even know how to read or write well. My family was very poor. I had worked since I was 12. And how did you get to me? You found me asking for work at the supply market. I was carrying sacks for $5 each. And what did I offer you? Work in your kitchen. But you also told me I had to study. Study? Asked Sebastian. Yes, continued Raoul. Mr. Harrison enrolled me in night school. He paid for my classes and books, and he gave me permission to leave early on days I had exams. And did you finish school? I finished high school. Now I am studying culinary arts at the university. Mr. Harrison still pays for my studies. Valerie looked at me with different eyes. Grandpa, why do you do that? Because I believe in education, honey. I believe everyone deserves a chance to grow. But, Dad, said Edward, if you believe so much in education, why didn't you tell me you wanted me to work with you? I wanted you to decide. I wanted you to come of your own will, not out of obligation. But I thought my job was more important. More important than what, Edward? Edward stayed quiet. He couldn't say more important than a little restaurant in front of all these people who had dedicated their lives to working in my restaurants. "Mr. Harrison," said Manny, "can I say something?" "Of course, Manny." "Edward, you have an extraordinary dad. We see him work every day. We see him worry about every employee, every detail. His restaurants are not just businesses, they are like families." "It's true," added Rose. "Mr. Harrison knows all our children by name. He goes to weddings, baptisms, funerals. When someone has problems, he is always there." "And never, ever has he made us feel less," said Carmen. "For him, there are no small jobs or big jobs. We are all important." Edward looked as if he were understanding something for the first time. "Dad, I always thought that your job was what, my son? Was less important than mine." The silence that followed was very heavy. The employees looked at me with sadness, as if they felt pain for me. "Edward," I said, "for 20 years you have thought that being an executive in a company was more important than being the owner of 7 restaurants that employ more than 200 people." "Yes, Dad, I thought that." "And do you know why you thought that?" "Because you cared more about what people thought than what was true. You cared more about looking good with your friends than knowing your own father." Monica started to cry quietly. Sebastian and Valerie looked ashamed. "But the saddest thing of all," I continued, "is that you taught my grandkids to think just like you." "Grandpa," said Sebastian, "we didn't know." "I know, son. You only learned what they taught you." "What can we do?" asked Valerie. That was the question I had been waiting for all night. "What can you do?" I repeated Valerie's question. I looked at the whole table, my employees waiting for my answer, my family with faces of regret. "That is a very difficult question, honey," I told Valerie, "because what happened tonight cannot be erased with pretty words." Edward straightened in his chair. "Dad, I know I made a mistake. I know that during all these years—" "No," I interrupted him. "Edward, it's not about making a mistake. It's about the fact that for 20 years you disrespected me. For 20 years you made me feel like I was nothing." "You're right, Dad. And do you know what hurts me most?" "What?" "That you had to find out I have money to treat me with respect." That hit him hard. Edward lowered his eyes. "If I had continued being the old man with the little restaurant, you would have continued being ashamed of me until the day you died." "No, Dad, that's not true." "No?" I addressed Monica. "Monica, tell me the truth. If you hadn't discovered I have money, would you have continued treating me the same?" Monica couldn't answer because we all knew the answer. "Mr. Martin," I said, "can you take out the will documents?" The attorney looked at me worried. "Are you sure, Mr. Harrison?" "Completely sure." Edward turned pale. "Dad, what will?" "The will, where I decided who I am going to leave all this to when I die." The attorney took out a thick folder and put it on the table. "Mr. Harrison made this will 5 years ago," he explained. 5 years?" asked Edward. "Yes," I answered him. 5 years waiting for things to change between us. 5 years waiting for you to come look for me. For you to want to really know your dad." "And what does the will say?" asked Monica with a trembling voice. "Read it, counselor." Mr. Martin opened the document. "The will establishes that in the event of Mr. Richard Harrison's death, 70% of his assets will be distributed among his oldest employees to ensure their economic stability and the continuity of the restaurants." Manny, Rose, Harvey, Carmen, and Raul looked at each other surprised. They knew nothing of this. 70%? asked Edward. Yes, and the remaining 30% would be divided among charities, scholarships for poor students, and help for needy families. Edward and Monica went mute. And us? Asked Edward with a thread of a voice. You don't appear in the will. The words fell like stones. Edward looked as if he had been slapped. But Dad, we are your family. Family? I asked him. Edward, when was the last time you invited me to dinner at your house? Edward couldn't remember. When was the last time my grandkids came to spend a weekend with me? Neither could remember. When was the last time Monica asked me how I was, if I needed anything, if I felt lonely? Total silence. You are not my family, I told them. You are my relatives. My true family is here. I pointed to my employees. Rose started to cry. Mr. Harrison, we didn't know. I know, Rose. But you have been with me through good times and bad. You have seen me work, fight, worry. You really are my family. Sebastian spoke with a broken voice. Grandpa, we want to be your family too. Oh yeah, son? And what are you willing to do to make it happen? Whatever is necessary, said Valerie. Okay. I am going to give you a chance, but it is going to have conditions. What conditions? Asked Edward. First condition. Edward, you are going to quit your job. Quit? But Dad! You are going to come work with me, from the bottom, as a waiter, for a full year. As a waiter? Asked Monica, horrified. As a waiter, I confirmed. So he learns what real work is, so he knows every part of the business. But, Dad, I have a degree in business, and I am the owner of 7 restaurants. Who do you think knows more about this business? Edward stayed quiet. Second condition. Monica, you are going to come work too, in the kitchen, helping wash dishes and clean tables. I can't do that, protested Monica. What are my friends going to say? Exactly that attitude is the problem, I told her. You think there are dignified jobs and undignified jobs. Here, you are going to learn that all jobs are dignified. Mr. Harrison, Third condition. Sebastian and Valerie are going to come every Saturday to work with me, without pay. They are going to learn what it is to earn money with the sweat of their brow. Yes, Grandpa, the two said at the same time. And fourth condition, I continued. During that year, you are going to live on what you earn working. No using money you have saved, no borrowing. You are going to live like working people live. Edward swallowed hard. And if we comply with all that? If you comply, if you demonstrate that you really want to change, then I will modify the will. How? I will give you 50% of everything, but with one condition, that you commit to continue taking care of all the employees like I have cared for them. Manny spoke up. Mr. Harrison, you don't have to do that for us. I'm not doing it just for you, Manny. I do it because I want my grandkids to learn what it means to have real responsibilities. And if we don't comply? Asked Edward. If you don't comply, if you back out, if you decide it is too hard or too humiliating, then the will stays as it is, and you never become part of my life again. Edward looked at Monica. Monica looked at Edward. They both looked terrified. Dad, said Edward, are you really asking us to leave our whole life? No, Edward. I am asking you to start living a real life. A life with values, with work, with humility. So, do you accept? If you accept, you start Monday. Edward arrives at 6 in the morning at the restaurant. Monica arrives at 7. And my grandkids arrive Saturday at 8 in the morning. That is in 3 days, murmured Monica. Exactly.
3 days to decide if you really want to be my family, or if you prefer to keep being strangers who share my last name. Edward stared at his hands for a long moment. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. Dad, I accept. Are you sure? I am sure. And you, Monica? Monica looked as if she were about to vomit, but after a moment, she nodded. I accept. And you, my grandkids? Yes, Grandpa, said Sebastian and Valerie. All right, I told them. But understand something. This is your only chance. If you fail, if you quit, if you don't comply, then to me, you are going to be dead. The weight of those words filled the entire table. Understood? Understood, everyone answered. Then, I said, see you Monday at 6 in the morning. 1 year later, I am sitting at the same table where all this started, at the gilded table, watching my son Edward tend to a table of 8 people with the efficiency of an experienced waiter. 20 months ago, if someone had told me I was going to see Edward with an apron on, carrying trays, smiling at customers and saying, "Thanks for coming, have a good night," I wouldn't have believed it. But there he is. My son, the proud executive, the one who was ashamed of his dad. Now he knows the name of every regular customer. He knows what dishes they like. He asks about their families. The first 3 months were hell. Edward arrived late. He complained about everything. He argued with me in front of customers. Monica cried every day. She burned her hands in the kitchen. She cut herself washing dishes. My grandkids came dragging their feet on Saturdays as if they were going to a punishment. I thought they were going to quit the first week, but something happened in the 4th month. Edward started to understand that being a waiter wasn't easy, that customers could be rude, that kitchens were hot, that working on your feet for 12 hours straight destroys your back. He started to see Manny, Rose, Harvey, and the others with different eyes. "Dad," he told me one night after an especially heavy shift, "I had no idea how hard this was." What thing? Everything. Serving tables, dealing with difficult customers, keeping the smile even if you are tired. What do you think now? I think for 20 years I was an idiot. That word surprised me. Edward never talked like that. Why do you say that? Because I believed my office job was more important than this. But here there is more responsibility, more skill, more emotional intelligence than in any office. Monica took 6 months to change. The first few months she spent complaining to her friends on the phone, telling them her father-in-law had forced her to work in the kitchen. But her friends, instead of giving her pity, started to distance themselves from her. "Monica, how weird that your father-in-law is a millionaire and you are working like that," they said with sarcasm. It was Carmen, the cleaning supervisor, who helped her change. One night, Monica was crying in the bathroom after burning a batch of bread. "Honey," Carmen told her, "why are you crying?" "Because this is very hard. Because I don't know why I am here." "Do you want me to tell you why you are here?" "Why?" "Because Mr. Harrison is giving you the chance to know your family for real. He is teaching you what he had to learn to build all this." "But it is very hard." "Of course it is hard. Do you think Mr. Harrison got where he is being lazy?" That conversation changed everything for Monica. She started asking questions, learning, understanding that every dollar they spent in her house came from someone's sweat. Sebastian and Valerie were the ones who understood fastest. By 3 months, they were arriving early on Saturdays. They wanted to learn new things. They asked smart questions.
"Grandpa," Sebastian told me one day, "why had you never brought us to work with you before?" "Because I thought your parents were going to ask me." "And why didn't they ask?" "Because they believed this wasn't good enough for you." Valerie, who was helping fold napkins, looked up. "Grandpa, my parents were very wrong." "Why do you say that, honey?" "Because here I have learned more in 6 months than in my whole life. I have learned to work as a team, to deal with different people, to value money." "And what else have you learned?" "I have learned who you really are. And I am very proud to be your granddaughter." Those words were worth more than all the millions I have in the bank. The hardest moment came in the 8th month. Edward got sick with the flu, but he came to work anyway. I sent him home, but he refused. "Dad, my colleagues need me. I can't leave them hanging." "Edward, you are sick. Go rest." "No, Dad. You taught us that here we are a family, and a family doesn't abandon each other." That's when I knew my son had understood the lesson. Last month, we had the meeting to review the will. The whole family was nervous. They had completed the 12 months, but they didn't know if I was satisfied. "Mr. Martin," I said, "proceed with the changes." "Are you sure, Mr. Harrison?" "Completely sure." So the new will establishes that Edward will inherit 40% of the restaurants, but with the condition that he must continue working in them directly. No being a boss from the office. Sebastian and Valerie will inherit another 20% when they turn 25, if they demonstrate they understand the value of work. The remaining 30% is still for the oldest employees and 10% for charities. Monica is not in the will, but Edward decided to share his part with her. "If she is willing to work for it," he told me. And Monica accepted. Now, Edward is my partner for real. Every morning we arrive together to check the restaurants. He knows all the employees, knows their problems, helps them when they need something. He has become the man I always wanted him to be. Monica works 3 days a week in the kitchen, not because she has to, but because she wants to. She says she had never understood where money really comes from. My grandkids keep coming on Saturdays. Sebastian wants to study restaurant management. Valerie is thinking about studying culinary arts. Tonight, while Edward finished his shift, he approached my table. "Dad," he said, "thank you." "Why are you thanking me?" "For not giving up on me, for giving me this opportunity, for teaching me who I really am." "And who are you really?" "I am your son, the son of Richard Harrison, and I am proud of that." Those words erased 20 years of pain. "Edward," I said, "there is something I want to tell you." "What, Dad?" "That I never doubted you would make it because you are my son, and Richard Harrison's children don't quit." Edward smiled, that smile I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Do you know what is the most beautiful thing about all this?" he asked me. "What?" "That my children are going to grow up knowing their grandfather for real. They are going to be proud of you from when they are little." And that was when I smiled too. Because after 73 years of life, after building an empire, after earning millions of dollars, the only thing that really mattered was that my family was proud of me, and I was proud of them. You know, looking back at everything I went through, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Now tell me, did this story make sense to you? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? And tell me, where are you listening from, pal? Just remember, this might be a story, but the truth about dignity and family is as real as the ground under your feet.